let us solve an unconventional case. So your client is the CM of Maharashtra who is seeking your opinion on how to curb the flooding problem in Mumbai next year. How would you help him? So folks who are in Bombay right now, you might feel that this is your reality. So this is a chance for you to make your life better. Okay. So problem, I hope I'll just repeat the problem again. Simple enough, your client is the CM of Maharashtra who is seeking your opinion on how to curb the flooding problem in Mumbai next year. And how would you help him? I'll give you like a couple of minutes to tackle this problem, get your thoughts in order. Unfortunately, I cannot make it very interactive, which I would do in a classroom where I will take your opinions and then collate them all together on the blackboard and then come up with a strategy. So take some time, try to draw it out on a piece of paper. And then what I'll do is I'll give you a way of solving it, which I find to be very elegant. And we can discuss why that was so elegant and what are the next steps that are involved in this. And again, I emphasize, if this was a real problem, you will probably get like, it would be like a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 6 month engagement. Okay. In which you will be solving for 100 different dimensions. In a 30-minute interview, you will not be doing that. So what you do is you start top down. Okay. You broadly lay out the problem that these are the big things to take care of. And then the interviewer will guide you. Okay, for the purpose of this case interview, let's look at this and let's not look at that. Okay, so anything that I say is only one direction that the interview can possibly take. All the other things I will ignore could possibly be a problem also, and the interviewer could have taken the case in that direction also, right? So don't be worried that why have I not included that, why have I not included that. There are 100 dimensions which you will solve. But in an interview, you just have to convince the interviewer that whatever problem is given to me, I can solve. So if I solve 5 dimensions, they are confident I can solve the other 95 also. Okay. So I hope this point is clear. This will save unnecessary trouble in our discussion. So take a minute and we will then discuss how I would go about this. Actually, someone has already thought about this. Has anyone just used the chat box? Has anyone decided to break the city of Bombay down into problem areas, less problematic areas, more problematic areas, that will kind of make a heat map of the city of Bombay, and we'll decide where the problem is more, where the problem is less. Is anyone adopting that strategy? Cool. So Aryaman, Priyansh, Garved, perfect, perfect, perfect. So great, folks. This is always the first answer which comes in a classroom setting. Okay, which already shows to me that you have a good problem solving skill, that you are doing what is known as 80-20, which is the bigger problem. Let's solve for that, and then we'll come to the smaller problem later. Okay, makes sense, right? The area which is crazy flooded, let's solve that, and then we'll go to later. So that's a way to go about this. But what you will realize if you actually build that information further is that it's not optimal right now in a case interview, because I like to use the Occam's razor while solving a case, which is essentially come up with a solution which has the least number of assumptions. Okay, and this kind of solution where I need so much information, which is the low-lying area, high-lying area, all of that will require a lot of information from the interviewer, which might not be useful. So let's not do that. So now let me tell you how I would do this. So before I come up with any solution, I would do the first step, which is clarify. Now, flooding problem in Mumbai next year. How many of you assumed already that we are talking about rains? I'm sure the answer is most of you, or if not a significant person, a significant number of people. And Ankita, great point. Yes, embankments are harmful, and yes, you spoke too early. I'm glad you brought that point up, because that's exactly what we have to control for. We will have the urge that this solution does not make sense, that solution does not make sense. Let's wait for that. Okay, because there might be a workaround. Embankments might be harmful, but we might have a way around that. So I'll build on Ankita's point further. Something is harmful or not cannot be your conclusion directly. It has to be the function of a discussion you have with the interviewer. We have to minimize the number of biases, the number of previous information we bring in. We can use our knowledge to frame questions, to frame the discussion, but we do not pass judgments. Remember, we are consultants, right? We are not the executors per se. Okay. Mukta, could we possibly start with who the client is? What is the client capable of doing? Exactly where I will start also. Okay. Great point, Mukta. We will do that. Okay. So we will clarify. One, I will say, okay, fine. When you talk about flooding problem, we're talking about the rains, right? And I'll get a yes. This affirmation from the interviewer is important, because now I know I'm dealing with a temporal problem, that a problem which comes for like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. If I'm not from Bombay, if I'm, let's say, a consultant based in London, I wouldn't even know what the flooding problem is in Bombay. So just because you are steeped into the context, do not assume that you know everything that's been talked about. If you just take in rains into consideration, you might have missed out some other dimension of the problem. In this case, there is no other dimension, but I'm saying how this is a trap. And remember my airport case, remember my telecom case, which I've already brought in. These are traps. Make sure you clarify that your understanding of the problem is the same as the problem intents. So I would have clarified. So when you say flooding problem in Bombay next year, are you talking about the flooding that's caused due to rainfall and how water gets collected in roads and all the places where it's not supposed to be? When I get an affirmation, now I know, okay, fine, this is the problem I'm solving for. Next question, how would you help him? Now I know the problem. I don't know the extent to which I have to solve the problem, right? What is being intended? Do they want that next season there should not be any water collection? Or they want, okay, fine, if I have X amount of water, I want 50% of the problem to get solved. We need to put in boundary conditions for our problems. If I ask you to run, won't you ask me for how long, or what's the distance you want me to cover, for how much time should I run? Why do we forget these basics when we're solving these problems? So you would want to know, yeah, problem solve. If I want to solve the problem, what are the constraints and what are the boundary conditions? How much problem do I have to solve? That's one more thing I'll clarify. Then going to Mukta's point, who is the client here? Like, what are my capabilities? And take this instance. If I am given a budget of 1 crore versus 100 crores versus the 10,000 crores, don't you think my solution will be very different? And whether I'm given an implementation timeline of 1 month versus 6 months versus 1 week, won't my solutions be very different? Don't you think this is something important to know upfront? I know all of you know that this is important, and this comes to, I think, the question that was asked in the break. When these skills are so easily understood, why is it so specialized? Because the specialization comes from knowing what to ask when. All of you would have eventually asked these questions, I'm very sure. But how many of you are asking these questions upfront? That becomes crucial. That becomes a deciding factor. Okay. So all of you have these skills. We just have to reorient your brain a little bit so that some of these questions come upfront, some of these come in the middle, and some of these come towards the end. Okay. So I hope you understand. We clarify the context. We clarify, what does the flooding problem mean? How much problem are we solving for? What are the resources that I have at my hand? What are the constraints I'm working with? Right. So 4 solid questions. Maybe you might want to ask a couple of other questions. Okay. So what kind of human resource support do I have? Whatever. Right. The idea is to ask 4 or 5 solid questions which you think will help you understand the problem very well. If any of the people that I know is solving this problem without asking at least these 3-4 basic questions, then I will definitely judge them negatively, because clearly they are not appreciating the problem, and what they want is to appreciate the solution. Once you appreciate the problem, the solution flows from it very quickly. And then, like the point Ankita was trying to make, something is feasible or not, something is harmful or not, let that come from the facts that are part of the case and not my judgment. And the facts will only happen when I make the interviewer talk. Again, I go back to this sheet. If I told you that my left column, a good check for me is whether this is empty or not. If anyone had jumped to the problem statement that this would have been empty, and I've said that this is a heuristic I use, that this is a problem for me. So make sure you ask something and you start filling in details there. Okay? So clarifying. Now, what are the exact clarifying questions to ask? Obviously, there are few, which is typically, what is the problem looking like right now? What is the end condition? So now, end condition, and essentially I have to make a bridge between what is now and what is the end condition. So what are the resources I have to construct this bridge? Okay. So three major heads of discussion that we typically have. You might want to ask a couple of questions more, and you will be sorted. Ankita has asked a good question. I'm not clear how much can we assume about certain facts. Ankita, this is a work in progress for a lot of us. This question will haunt you even after you've done your first 20 cases, 25 cases. I cannot give you a black and white answer for this. Okay? It depends upon your level of comfort. And after practicing a few cases, you will start realizing a little more on when certain piece of information is relevant and when it is not. Okay? So critical is to understand what is now, what is the end condition, and to build that bridge, what are the resources that are required. These are essentials. You can ask for more questions if you want. Okay? But do not spend the first 15 minutes of a case asking questions. A good rule of thumb is maybe take not more than like 3-4 minutes. Bring it closer to 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes if you can. Okay? And then have a clear sense of what is it that you don't know, so that you can ask those questions as you solve the case. There is no clear answer of how much we can assume. It's something you will build with experience, and you will still make mistakes with it. With your good communication skills, you can cover up those mistakes. Like I'll tell you for a fact, I'll give you an example. Uh, in my, I recently, when I got my interview with one of the consulting firms, they asked me a question, and because of stress or whatever, I forgot to ask a question completely. Okay. And we discussed the whole case, the whole situation. And then towards the end, I was like, oh shit, I forgot to ask about that one aspect. Can I please also get to know a little more about it? The interviewer just smiled. He was like, yeah, I was hoping you would ask that question. But great, now that you have asked me, I know you will consider it, and I know you can solve that. Okay? So you should know that this is completely fine to be in this state of uncertainty. Okay? Folks, just give me 1 second. So now that you have clarified this, try to see if you can spend a little more time and think of another way of solving it. Okay? Just give me 1 second. So I hope you folks are clearer that you cannot always strive for perfect clarity. So we'll have to make do with what we have. Okay. So let's see how I would have solved this problem. Okay. And let's see what we can learn from that aspect. Okay. Now, instead of going with low-lying areas, high-lying areas, what I would do is I would rephrase the problem. And please follow me here because this is critical. What is happening here? My problem is not rainfall. My problem is the impact of rainfall, which is water getting collected. Now, water gets collected all the time, right? Water gets collected in rivers, in lakes, in ponds, and that's not my problem again. That's actually something I like. My problem is water gets collected on the roads. So my problem is water is getting collected at an area where it should not be. So from calling it a flooding problem, I have rephrased the problem to my problem is that water is getting collected where it should not be, and that is what I want to solve for. This kind of rephrasing, I typically do it out loud. So the interviewer can follow my thought process, is critical because it helps you structure the problem better. Now that I have used the word water is getting stored or collected, I can now solve it as a storage problem. Okay. To give an analogy, let's take a bucket. You have inflow of the water and you can have an outflow of the water. The amount of water that gets stored, hi folks, please mute yourself here. The amount of water that gets stored depends upon the amount of water that is coming in and the amount of water going out, right? We've all seen how a bucket or any kind of such system works. So I'll just bring this analogy here because I'm solving for a collection problem. So there is certain amount of input which is happening. Clearly there is insufficient amount of output which is happening, which is causing storage of water where it should not be. For keen observers, you might realize where I got this idea, that revenue minus cost is equal to profit. I used my most basic equation that I use for all profit and loss frameworks, and I realized that, hey, this also looks pretty similar to that. Input minus output is equal to delta storage. Okay. So my problem already has now two solutions to it. Okay. I have to reduce the amount of storage. So either I reduce the input or I increase the output. Now let's go a step further. I've already said that my problem is not water getting stored in ponds and rivers and lakes and whatnot. It's a problem with storage which is happening on the road. So I'll break this down further, that input minus output is equal to two types of storages. There is storage which is desirable and then storage which is undesirable, right? This I like, this I don't like. So I'll just take this term here. I just call it S undesirable is equal to S is equal to input minus output minus storage desirable. Very basic. So this is what I meant by having a quantitative outlook. This is where it helps. Now the equation I have made is a class 8th level of maths equation, right? A plus B is equal to C, and just taking the terms here and there. That's all I'm doing. So this is the amount of math quantitative outlook that is required, nothing more than that. So whether you have done psychology or history or anything of that sort, it does not disqualify you from making this up. Okay. Now the beauty of phrasing the problem in the manner that I did is that without doing anything, I already have three pathways of solution. If I have to reduce my undesirable storage, I either have to reduce my input, increase my output, or increase my desirable storage. Now it becomes a simple question of breaking each of these three down. So how I would do it is, so now I've reached this point. Now I'll tell the interviewer, okay, so we have three pathways. I would like to deal with them one after the other. and given input seems like a problem, let me first deal with input, then I'll deal with output, and then I'll see if there's something that can be done with S desirable. You can do something else also, whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay. I hope till now it's very clear how we have come up to this point. That's why using your profit and loss framework is helpful, or learning those frameworks are helpful, because they give you an idea of how to be creative. So the creativity aspect comes in on how do you rejig this equation. And then I'm just using class 8 math. Now, I have to break down my input. So people say, inputs are happening through the sea, through the rain, through all of these things. All are right answers. But I don't know whether these answers are what is known as MECE. Now, this is an important concept. MECE is the heart of case solving process. It means mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. It means breaking down my problem into its constituent elements such that those elements are mutually exclusive, that one thing does not impact the other, and collectively they are exhaustive, that there is no other thing outside of what I've listed down. So let's take the case of profits. Profits are a function of revenue and cost. Revenues and costs are not the same thing. There's a different revenue account, there's a different cost account. So they are exclusive, and collectively there's no third thing which goes into the calculation of a profit. Everything which has to do with profit can be either built into revenue and cost. The reason why this is so helpful is because if I figure out that my revenues are not a problem, then the only conclusion possible is that my cost is a problem. And that is what I was talking to initially also, what this whole process is about: ignoring the fat, removing a few things, because when you remove one thing, you get more confident that the problem is in that other thing which is remaining. So slowly and slowly in this whole complex problem, you will start removing, you will first break them down into constituent parts, and then you will keep removing the part one after the other. So essentially what you are left with has to be the problem which is driving your client crazy, because you made the initial structure in an exhaustive fashion. So all the possibilities were laid out, and once you've eliminated all the other possibilities, the remaining possibility is the only one which is possible. I love to quote Sherlock Holmes here. So Sherlock Holmes has this dialogue in one of the books or one of the TV series episodes, wherein that once you remove all the other possibilities, the only solution which is left, howsoever improbable, has to be the right solution. So Mr. Sherlock Holmes comes to our rescue in understanding case studies also. This is exactly the principle we'll follow. We'll remove all other possibilities till whatever we are left with, howsoever improbable, makes sense. This is what we are doing in the storage case also. Input minus output. There is nothing in input which links with output, so they are mutually exclusive, and collectively they are exhaustive. Storage is only driven by input and output. Obviously, there are some background factors also which you could have included, but that's aside. Okay. So now, when I break down my input, one way is to say, okay, input comes from rains, input comes from rivers. I can name like 10 different sources. But even after naming 10, there is a lingering doubt in my mind. Is there an 11th resource which I'm not thinking of? And that doubt is not conducive to case solving. You have to make sure that there is nothing left outside of what you are saying. So what we'll do is we'll break this in a different manner. What we'll say that the physical world only has 3 dimensions. Either something can come from the top, something can come from the same level, or something can come from the bottom. So I will break my input down into something coming from up, something coming from same level, something coming from down. Right? There is no other way an input can happen. And I will break down my output also entirely identically. That if I want to get rid of water, either I have to send it up, or I have to throw it out at the same level, or I have to send it down. Okay. Now, this is the creativity aspect of a problem solving process, that I have broken down my input and output in a manner that no one can have a problem with, because I'm sure that this is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Okay. So now, once I've done this, now I will say, okay, fine. From above, rains come. From same level, I have the sea, I have the river, I might have some pipes and whatnot. From down below, I have the groundwater coming up. Same way, if I have to go output up, I will have to cause evaporation. From the same level, if I have to do, I have to create drainage. If I have to go it down, I have to increase soil absorption. So you see, we already have 3 solutions in input, 3 solutions in output, plus S desirable. So we have 7 solution pathways already for our problem, without, frankly speaking, actually solving the problem per se. All I have done is I've rephrased the problem and have said upper, niche and same level. Okay. So this is structuring simplified, if I could say that. Now I will use my logical sense, like things like whether something is harmful or not, whether something is practical or not. This is what is known as 80-20. Using your judgment to figure out what drives bigger part of the problem. Okay. So clearly, if I'm talking about the rainy season, I know that the biggest part of the problem is driven by input which is coming from up. So if I can tackle that somehow, I will solve the biggest chunk of the problem. Let us say compared to groundwater coming up. Groundwater coming up, I don't even know if that's a problem or not. I included that to have my structure to be comprehensive, but even if it's a problem, it will be probably 1 of 1,000 or 1 of 10,000 of the rainfall. So I can safely ignore this. I can safely ignore this. Similarly, in a rainy season when the clouds are there, sun is not shining, evaporation might not be a method to actually get rid of the water. So I might be able to ignore evaporation also. Now, what I'm doing is I'm not using my brain initially. I'm laying down everything. Then I'm using my assumptions and I will clarify them with the interviewer making the process. I did not just cut out evaporation. I laid out a reasoning in front of you. I said, it's rainy season and clouds are everywhere. It might be difficult for water to get evaporated. So I guess evaporation will not be a possible solution. So I can ignore that for now. That's my entire sentence. This is communication. Okay. So the interviewer and you are on the same page at all points. So this is how you will essentially start the problem. This is somewhere in the middle of the problem. Now, and let's break down S desirable also. Now, there are so many different ways you could break this down. One of the easiest way that I do it is natural and artificial. Okay. That there are natural ponds, natural lakes, rivers, whatever. And then there are artificial ponds and artificial lakes. Makes my life simpler. And then natural, if I have to break down, I can look at their capacity, that I can see if they're existing capacities. Do I need to increase capacity or do I need to clean up existing capacity? Like we can go into a whole host of things, right? Why I'm not going into the particulars of any particular solution is because in each case, those particulars will differ. If you have solved the case to this extent where we are, then you will definitely solve the entire case. Your problem is already solved. That's why the particulars don't matter so much. Okay. So once you do this, it really doesn't matter how you break the problem down as long as you break the problem down. Okay. Now, let's do one more interesting thing. Let's look at rainfall. Okay. Now, every time I discuss this problem with people, they ignore rainfall also as like evaporation. They say, oh, what can we do about rainfall? Obviously, we can't do anything about rainfall. And I said, wait a minute. Let's at least say a statement out loud and then decide whether we want to ignore this or not. So the statement I want to say out loud is that rains are basically a function of what is the problem here? That too much amount of water is falling over a limited amount of area in a certain amount of time, if the same amount of rainfall which happens in Bombay over like the 3-4 crazy days when flooding is at its worst, if I was to spread it over 30 days, do you think the problem will happen? The answer is no. Or even in those 3-4 days, if let's say only 1/10 of the amount of rainfall which fell, if that happened, will that be a problem? The answer again is no. So phrasing the problem helps me understand what are the solutions inbuilt in the problem. If I can either reduce the amount of rain or increase the amount of span in which the rainfall happens, then my problem is also solved. Now, after saying all of this, if I say, well, I don't know if that can be done, so let me ignore that. At this point of time, your interviewer will definitely come into the picture and say, hey, but what if this could be done? Because it can be done. There's a technology called cloud seeding through which you can make the cloud fall earlier. So you can preempt the rainfall by a few days, by a few weeks, so that the rainfall happens for an extended period of time, or you can make the rain happen in Arabian Sea itself and not over Bombay. You didn't need to know cloud seeding, but you need to not ignore the problem upfront. Once you say that if I was to somehow be able to reduce the amount of rainfall or increase the time frame, then the problem could be solved, then the interviewer will throw you a lifeboat. So that's why communication matters, because what you don't know, the interviewer will know. Okay. So this is a very, very important point, and I hope you include that in your reasoning and your communication when you are solving a case. So I hope this gives you a very good sense of where we are in terms of how to solve a case. Now, what I will do is, so at this point, let me tell you what will happen. You break this down into this point, then you will ask the interviewer, do you want me to look at something specific? Okay. And the interviewer, in the interest of time, rather than wanting you to do everything, will probably give you 1 or 2 areas that they feel are more feasible, and they will ask you to look at those areas only. And you can then confirm, okay, fine, so can we ignore the rest? And the answer is yes. So let's say the interviewer tells me, why don't we explore the idea of the output going back to the ground? That's the only dimension I want you to focus on. Fair enough. As the Lord commands, we shall have to do. Okay. So let's do this on a new page. Okay. So let's look at only one specific, that I have to somehow get rid of water by putting it in the ground. Okay. So now I'm doing this in a more mathematical fashion because I'm more comfortable with it. But again, it's class 8th math. Very approachable, just a quantitative mindset. Now, what I will do is what I called creating a formula. It is very helpful because it makes me aware of what are the different possibilities which are going into solving this problem. So just follow my lead here. What I am trying to do, get rid of water. Okay. I will solve this in the unit. So get rid of water. Water. The unit of volume is meter cube of water. In cases where I'm solving for travel, I will use distance. In case you don't know the unit, that's completely fine. This is just one way of solving the problem, like I mentioned. Now, the problem statement is I want to increase the amount of water which goes into the ground. That's my problem. So my solution pathway is already there in my problem, which is I have to figure out how much ground is there. Only then I can figure out how much water can go into it. So I will do area of Mumbai into, now anyone would know that water does not go in concrete. It has to have some kind of non-concretized area. So I will do percentage of area non-concrete. In that, I will do percolation capacity. Right? How much water can go in. So now I can verify whether this formula is correct or not. Area of Bombay is in meter square into something which is unitless because percentage doesn't have a unit. And percolation is meter cube by meter square. how much amount of water can go into a unit area of soil. Okay, fair enough. You have again, don't get scared by this if you're not comfortable with it. This is just one way of doing it. Okay, so we can have a simpler, like one example I used to cover in YF in Ashoka was cost of travel to Delhi from campus. So I know this cost will be in rupees. Okay. So now basic idea, how much distance do I have to cover? Cost per distance. This is a static thing. Distance is static between Delhi and Sonipat. Cost per distance will depend upon the mode I am using. Let's say I'm using car. Okay. So then it will depend upon the fuel that I have, fuel consumed, into cost per liter, and that becomes my formula. So you don't have to go into meter square and meter cube and all of that jazz. In some cases the formula might be more approachable to you. In those cases you can use a formula. Okay, now what it helps me is that whether I'm doing the meter cube or the cost of Delhi, it gives me what are the things which I can change, what are the things I cannot change. Area of Bombay is something clearly I cannot change. Like I cannot change the distance between Delhi and Sonipat. Here, I can perhaps change the amount of concretized area. I can pass a law. I can say that we have to limit the concretized area. Areas which can be turned green should be turned green again. Same here. Here I have control over the mode of transport. So I now know with this formula what is something I can change or not. And then the third aspect, percolation capacity of soil. Can I somehow change this? So I didn't know what my solution pathway is going to be when I started solving this problem. But by the end of it, by creating a formula, I have some idea. Now, percolation is what? You might have seen if you are watering your plants in a pot, that it will absorb some certain amount of water, but after a point of time, the water starts coming up. So I have to increase the amount of water the soil can hold. So what do? My first instinct is there a chemical I can add to the soil? And the interviewer tells me, yes, there is a chemical which can be added to the soil, which increases soil's water absorption capacity 10x. Okay. So now my soil can absorb 10x amount of water compared to what it could have earlier. So my problem is solved to a great extent now, right? That if I have this chemical, I can use this and then water will get absorbed and then flooding problem will be controlled and great, we're living in La La Land. But the solution does not end here. Let's say once the case is still ending, as a prudent case solver, you will go ahead and do one more step. It is what I called a feasibility analysis or a risk analysis or an impact analysis. Okay. So one cool way of presenting this information is in a 2x2 matrix. What I will do is, so this is one recommendation. Let's say out of the case I come up with like 3, 4, 5, 5. Let's say I come up with 5 recommendations, and still you have to tell me which is the most important recommendation, because you can do 5 things, but what is the first thing you should do? What is the second thing you should do? What is the third thing you should do? There has to be some prioritization in your any activity that you do, right? So the way I prioritize is a very consultant friendly manner, which makes it look nice. In this 2x2, I have feasibility and I have impact. High, low, low, high. And on the basis of my judgment, I will put, let's say, one solution here, 2 solutions here, one solution here, one solution here. So clearly solution which has low feasibility and low impact is to be ignored. Why waste money on this when it's hard to do and doesn't get even results? what we'll definitely want to do first is a high impact, high feasibility solution. And when it comes to low impact, high feasibility, or low feasibility, high impact, there's a choice to be made. What does the client want to do? Does the client want structural reforms? Then perhaps a low feasibility, high impact solution matters more. Does the client want something to show very quickly to people? Ki, oh, as a politician, we have taken some steps. Then high feasibility, low impact solutions are ones that I will go for. So all solutions are great. Depending upon a client's context, what solution will get implemented changes. And that's where you're more client friendly. If you remember initially what is consulting, when I defined it, I said you have to solve according to the objectives of the client. And this is again a communication element. Do you understand your client's objective and do you frame your solution according to what the client needs? Okay. So this is how I will present my solution. Now, someone might ask, how do I figure out whether something is high feasibility, low feasibility? How do I figure out whether something is high impact, low impact? Well, impact is much harder to discern, and it typically is based on the conversation you have with the interviewer. There are no clear dimensions of it. Here I know impact would be measured in what gets water levels to dip down the furthest are high impact solutions. But which one is a high impact, which one is a low impact solution is not very easily visible. So you will just have to discuss with the interviewer. Don't assume that you need to know this upfront. It's a discussion at the end of the day, and this is a very important point. I don't know if I forgot to bring it up earlier, but all your case interviews are a simulation of how you would behave with a client. That's why the communication, the client friendliness matters so much. Assume that you're already a consultant and assume that your interviewer is actually a client already. And what you have to do is solve the problem in a manner that the client, the interviewer gets it the first time and according to their objectives. So you will not solve a problem independent of your client in real life, right? Because they have to implement it. Similarly, you do not want to solve your problem independent of an interviewer when you are doing the case question. Sometimes the interviewers, to stress you out, might ask you to do it alone. More often than not, they will make it a collaborative effort. So have a discussion with them, but don't ask them kiddish points. Okay, so what should I do now? Okay, do you think this seems feasible to you? They're not there to give you answers. They are there to have a discussion. So you can say, this does not seem like a very high impact to me because of this reason. Would you agree? And that's when you get a response from them. Okay. So impact is based on whether something is high or low is based on the discussion with the interviewer. Feasibility, whether it is high or low, is again a function of a discussion with the interviewer. But you can use some dimensions to answer that question better. And the framework that I like to use is basically, some people call it PESTLE. Okay. Which is P for politico admin, E for environmental, S for socio-cultural, T for technological, L for legal, E for economic. So typically, implementation can have problems coming from these 6 sources. And especially when you're dealing with problems which have an interface with society, with the world, then these are even more relevant. Now, which not all 6 of them will apply in equal measure in all situations. And you cannot be a parrot and bring up all 6 in every situation. So you will have to prioritize, you have to think which one is more feasible. Let's say I mentioned cloud seeding. I will immediately think of, hey, is that a very expensive solution or not, because it's an emerging technology? If I'm changing the environment, will it be okay from an environmental perspective? So immediately I'll think of economic and environment. Now compare that to when I say, okay, fine. When I said non-concretization, can I change the non-concretized nature of my city? Can I increase the green cover? Immediately I will think, okay, fine. If I try to do that, there will be a significant amount of political administrative challenge which will come in because people will revolt. Am I prepared to handle that? Will there be legal challenges which will come up against the government trying to do this? So the 6 dimensions are like a guide or a ready reckoner for you to come up with the relevant points wherever the situation demands. So it's a pretty useful framework to remember from the perspective of risk assessment, from the perspective of feasibility assessment. Okay. And you apply them as and when you feel like. You can be very creative about this. Okay. Like when I say add chemical into the soil, which will increase the percolability of the soil by 10x. You can say, okay, fine, the environmentalists will have a problem with it because we don't know the long-term impact it will have on my soil. Economically, it's a problematic solution. It might be very expensive to procure this chemical. Technologically, the technology is untested. If people will have a problem with it, will it lead to second-order effects when it comes to political administrative problem? So depending upon the kind of discussion that you're having with the interview, you can go into as much detail or as little detail as you want. Okay. So this is the entire expanse of this case. So this was approach 1, which I call the delta approach, which is to break down a problem as a difference of 2 things. Okay, that can I break this problem into A minus B or A plus B or a mixture of 2, 3 things? Can I break this into an equation of form which I bring in from the profit equation, because profit is the quintessential delta equation. The profit is equal to revenue minus loss. Okay, so that's one approach. Second thing, or which could be a different approach or could be a meta approach to this approach, is to break the problem down into 3 phases. Okay, and we'll end the discussion with this point. It is my SOS. Anytime I cannot come up with a problem, I break it down into 3 parts. Ki boss, for any situation, for any problem, there are 3 aspects. There are pre, there are during, there are post. When we discussed your career in consulting, we know that there are 3 concerns. There are concerns about your profile. So before you even become a consultant, are the conditions right for that? Second, would you like being a consultant? So what is your life going to be while you are a consultant? Third, what are the exit options? So you see how we can apply this 3-way framework even to what we were discussing about your life as a consultant. So any complex problem can be broken down into these 3 parts. And I'll come up with more examples on the next slide for this. Now, in this case, we could have said, okay, fine, there are 3 types of solutions I will do. One is before the rains occur, second, during the rains, and third, post the rains. A lot of what we discussed earlier is essentially the pre aspect. I could have made my solution more airtight by including things I would have done during the flood and after also, if that was relevant to the case. So I have used one approach and mixed it with a second approach to have a bigger approach which is even more exhaustive. So this is what I mean by coming up with an original structure and mixing and matching things. So I hope you appreciate this pre, during, post and how we could have used it in this setting. Let me tell you a few more examples of how we can do this. Okay, few examples which I have liked. So disaster management. So again, and the practical example is also your consulting journey. One is disaster management plan. So this was a case which was asked to someone at Ashoka a few years ago at Dalberg, that you had to create a disaster management plan for a city. One quick way of structuring the problem would be that the disaster management plan should have 3 steps to it. There should be there should be a set of things which should be done before the disaster, okay, which should ensure that the impact of the disaster is mitigated. There are things that you do during the disaster. What do you plan for that? And then there are things that you do after the disaster. So a problem which seems a little difficult to structure, the disaster management plan, the bada cheez, it's so huge. There'll be so many things which will come under its ambit. What we have done is we have given ourselves a lifeboat of pre, during, post, and we've broken it down. So especially in development sector cases, especially in cases which are very hard to structure, I use this. One more example, which I think is in one of the case books also, I don't remember, is if let's say I tell you that Shah Rukh Khan has to make a movie, Hollywood movie next year, how will you go about doing it? Again, you can do pre, during, post. What are the things that are required during a movie? What are the things which are what are things that are required before a movie, during a movie, and after the movie? Okay, like after the movie would be, do I have access to the theaters? Do I have access to distribution channels and all those things? During would be, do I have access to shooting locations and all of those things? Pre could be, do I have access to the right kind of writer, actor, actresses, and all of those things. So a very, very random problem can be a little more structured using this. And after this, once the problem starts looking a little more simpler, a little more familiar, then it's easier to come up with the constituent parts. So I hope you're appreciating the power of this. I'll take two more examples, like the planning a party an example. Again, I think it's very apparent to you that I'll do the same thing. Things I need to keep in mind up before a party, right? Who to invite, what to do. Things I need to do during a party. Things I need to do post a party. Do I need to send a thank you note to people who turned up? Do I need to do any kind of other follow-up? Whatever. So kind of rounds up the thing. One very interesting example that I did was discounts of a food aggregator. Okay, so the case was a much bigger one, and maybe we can discuss the case if we get the time on day 3. But it was largely that a discount aggregator, a food aggregator like a Swiggy or Zomato, is bleeding badly, and we figured out that the discounts are a problem. So the way I structured the discounts were in 3 parts. There are so again, pre, during, and post. What I meant by pre was there are discounts which are given for customer acquisition. So you say that if you download our app, we'll give you cash back for the first 3 orders. We've all seen that, right? So pre-discounts, when it's not a customer and you're kind of asking them to become a customer. During, the day-to-day discounts that you get when you order food. And the third is post. This was the most interesting one, which is that when a customer is trying to leave your platform, let's say I've had a terrible experience and I register a complaint and I want to leave your platform. So the discounts that come in, right? If you place a complaint at a Zomato or a Swiggy, they might immediately give you like 100 rupees cash back that, hey, you had a bad experience, take this coupon from us. So that's the post kind of discount. So with some amount of creativity, I had no idea how to break the discounts first, but just using pre, during, post, then I just broke down my own journey with the platform and I realized, hey, yeah, actually there are 3 types of discounts. The pre-discount, the during discount, and the post-discount. Okay. So a very powerful way of breaking a problem down if you can get used to it.